Before dawn broke over Ouagadougou, armored vehicles bearing foreign diplomatic insignia quietly rolled through the gates of Burkina Faso's presidential compound. On the surface, it appeared to be an ordinary diplomatic visit. But hidden behind tailored suits and elegantly printed invitations was a sinister plot called Operation Silence. This was no regular diplomatic mission. It was a covert operation with one objective: to capture or eliminate President Ibrahim Traoré. The plan was orchestrated by top Nigerian officials, most notably Minister of Internal Affairs Charles Bakari, a hardliner known for leading ruthless crackdowns in northern Nigeria. Operation Silence was shrouded in absolute secrecy. The mission file was stamped eyes only, and the directive was chillingly clear: leave no trace. Silence all witnesses. If Traoré resists, eliminate him. In the eyes of its architects, Traoré wasn't a president, he was a threat. A spark with the potential to ignite uncontrollable flames across West Africa, and the threat was real. In under a year, Ibrahim Traoré, a young and fearless leader in his 30s, had become a political wildfire. He had expelled French forces, rejected conditional aid from the IMF and World Bank, and openly denounced neocolonialism. But what terrified Nigeria's elites even more was his rising influence among youth and soldiers, not only in Burkina Faso, but also in Mali and inside Nigeria itself. Universities in Nigeria were abuzz with debates about the Traoré model. Young military officers were discussing the idea of a Sahel alliance, united and independent from Western oversight. The whispers of possibility were growing louder, turning from dreams into declarations. In a closed-door meeting in Abuja, President Bola Tinubu listened as his intelligence advisors laid out the growing threat. One voice finally cut through the tension. If we wait, he becomes a symbol. If we move now, we can still call it prevention. It was Charles Barry, and no one dared to challenge him. Immediately, a black ops unit named Omega was activated, operating outside parliamentary oversight. It was composed of Nigeria's elite operatives, trained, armed, and authorized to act without legal consequence. Their cover, a diplomatic visit to discuss counterterrorism and trade. Their real mission, neutralize Ibrahim Traoré before his vision spreads further. Everything was meticulously planned. The timing, early morning, when the palace's security detail would be minimal. The convoy, SUVs armored, for extraction. A helicopter was even prepped on a sports field outside Thessaly to whisk the target out before anyone could raise the alarm. But what the Nigerian operatives failed to consider was this: Traoré was no longer alone. After months of facing internal sabotage and external pressure, he had built an internal intelligence network, one made up of Sahel war veterans, young hackers, loyal officers, and grassroots informants. These weren't just security guards. They were believers in Traoré's vision, watching every movement in and out of the palace. So when the Nigerian delegation arrived, the red flags were already flying. A morning visit from known hardliners, no interpreters, no trade officials, only political enforcers in Polish shoes. The trap they believed they were setting for Traoré had, in fact, already closed around them. While the diplomats rehearsed their lines, and the Omega unit readied its restraints behind the scenes, Traoré's team watched, waited, and prepared for the moment the operation would reveal itself. The would-be captives were about to learn that sovereignty cannot be kidnapped, and that the young president they came to silence had already outmaneuvered them. Traoré wasn't just defending himself. He was about to turn the hunters into the hunted. The Nigerian Omega unit thought they had everything under control. Disguised as a diplomatic delegation, the black SUVs rolled through the gates of Burkina Faso's presidential compound under the cover of early morning light. Their arrival was officially marked as a high-level bilateral meeting to discuss regional security, cooperation, and trade. But behind the rehearsed smiles and stiff handshakes, a far darker agenda was in motion. One meant Tassilance, the most defiant voice rising in West Africa. Their target, President Ibrahim Traoré. Unknown to them, however, Traoré had already been warned. For months, Burkina Faso's young leader had built more than just policy reforms. He had quietly developed an intricate internal intelligence network made up of Sahel war veterans, former freedom fighters, digital activists, and loyalist military officers, all bound not by salary or politics, but by shared belief. These men and women weren't just guarding a president. They were guarding a movement, a dream, a future. When the Nigerian operatives dressed in tailored suits and diplomatic badges entered the presidential palace, everything seemed normal. There was a press conference scheduled with cameras ready, flags of both nations lining the stage. The ambassador rehearsed his speech while photographers captured posed smiles. Meanwhile, a handful of unfamiliar aides loitered near restricted zones, communicating with hidden earpieces and nervously shifting under heavy coats despite the heat. Burkina Faso security personnel, though outwardly calm, were tracking every move. In a command center beneath the palace, Colonel Sekou Zita Traoré's head of intelligence listened to intercepted satellite communications. A single message sent chills through the room: extract the target within the hour. No press. Ensure full diplomatic cover. The code matched a previously flagged Nigerian directive. The moment was confirmed. This was not a diplomatic mission. It was a covert abduction. Zita passed the message through a secure channel to the president. Within minutes, Traoré made his decision. He would not confront the operatives directly. He would disappear not in fear, but in strategy, and he knew exactly how. Decades earlier, revolutionary leader Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's legendary former president, had secretly commissioned an underground tunnel system beneath the presidential palace. It was designed as a last resort escape route in the event of coup attempts or foreign attacks. Most had forgotten it even existed. Traoré had not. As the special ops team positioned themselves to make their move, signaling each other, readying hidden cuffs, Ibrahim Traoré was already gone. Escorted by a single trusted aide, he passed through a locked archive room, pressed a hidden panel, and vanished into the narrow passage behind a rusting shelf. The door closed behind him with a soft mechanical click, and the underground silence swallowed him whole. At that exact moment, the Omega unit attempted to engage, but the chair in the West Wing room was empty. So was the hallway. And when they turned to exit, expecting a quick extraction route, they found themselves surrounded not by elite commandos, but by hundreds of silently repositioned Burkina guards, shoulders squared, weapons holstered, but ready. There was no need for a firefight. The message was already clear. You are not in control here. You're not even guests. You are surrounded. Outside, the streets of Ouagadougou erupted. Word spread like wildfire. They came for Traoré, but he escaped, and now they're trapped. By midday, crowds had gathered around the palace gates. Taxi drivers abandoned their fares to block main roads. Market vendors closed their stalls and marched with handwritten placards. Students pounded on drums and chanted, "This is not Abuja. This land kneels to no one." The Nigerian delegation, once confident and composed, was now barricaded inside the very building where they had planned an arrest. Ambassador Mimano stood frozen at the window, watching the sea of protesters grow. Colonel Okoro barked orders into a secure satellite phone, but no response came. Their operation was dead. Their cover was blown. Their target had outmaneuvered them completely. In a stunning reversal, the hunters had become the hunted, and the message sent to the world broadcast across news channels, social media, and radio waves was unmistakable. Africa is no longer a pawn on someone else's board. Traoré didn't just evade an assassination attempt. He flipped it on its head. He turned a carefully crafted trap into a global humiliation for those who dared to test the will of a people who had finally found their voice. And it was only the beginning. News of the failed attempt to abduct President Ibrahim Traoré did not remain confined to the walls of power. It ignited a wave of outrage among the people of Burkina Faso. Within hours, the story spread like wildfire across encrypted messaging apps, social media platforms, and word of mouth in markets and schools. From the bustling streets of Ouagadougou to remote rural villages, one question echoed everywhere. Why are they trying to take our leader? Their response from the public was swift and unprecedented. Thousands, then tens of thousands, flooded the streets, waving national flags and banners printed with President Traoré's face. many painted slogans directly onto their clothing or the walls of their homes. Waga is not Abuja. This is not land that kneels. They beat drums, clanged metal pots, blew whistles, and gathered at government buildings, public parks, and most notably, the Nigerian embassy. Meanwhile, Burkina Faso's security forces acted with silent precision. There were no gunshots, no crackdowns. The soldiers didn't need to act because they knew the people are the court today. The military cordoned off the Nigerian embassy, preventing any personnel from leaving without official clearance. The scene resembled an open-air tribunal with thousands of witnesses documenting history as it happened. Across social media, images and videos of the uprising flooded timelines. One showed an elderly woman holding up her sandal and shouting, "We've knelt long enough. It's time to stand." Within hours, hashtags like #Waga is not Abuja and #off Traoré were trending across Africa and beyond. TikToks, tweets, and live streams carried the pulse of APOPL defending their own. The magnitude of the people's response not only shattered the Omega operation, it sent shock waves across the continent. Nigeria found itself momentarily diplomatically isolated as neighboring countries cautiously distanced themselves from the covert operation. Many openly praised the people of Burkina Faso for defending sovereignty in a time when silence has become a norm. For the citizens of Burkina Faso, that day wasn't just about protest. It was proof that they were no longer pawns in a geopolitical chess match. They were the ones holding the pieces now, and they were ready not just to protect a man, but to defend a symbol of an unbending future. As public outrage still roared in the streets of Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré appeared unexpectedly on national television. There was no grand stage, no flag-draped podium, just a plain room, a long wooden table and a national flag hanging silently behind him alongside hand-marked maps. He sat upright, gaze steady, unshaken. Before him lay a crimson-colored file folder, its cover still bearing the official seal of the Nigerian embassy. Today, he began in a calm but resolute voice, "We're not here to attack, but to speak the truth." With care, Traoré opened the file, holding up each page to the camera. Every page bore stamps, directives, and operational codes detailing a covert operation known as Operation Silence, Nigeria's classified plan to neutralize the target on Burkina soil. No court ordered this, he emphasized. This was not justice. This was a conspiracy in the shadows. He paused, then looked straight into the camera. "We are not the threat to Africa," he declared. "We are reclaiming it. Every inch of land, every ounce of belief, every voice long stolen through treaties no one voted for and wrapped in invisible chains." Traoré didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words, even spoken softly, rang like a bell in the silence of a continent. As he spoke, the screen behind him projected footage of farmers reviving arid land, children studying beneath solar-powered lights, and women leading cooperative food initiatives. "These images are not propaganda," he said, motioning to the footage. "They're reality. They are the path we and others like us are walking, not to fight anyone, but to finally stand on our own." Then his message shifted. "I do not speak only for Burkina Faso," he said. "I speak for Africa's new generation from Lagos to Bamako, from Name to Kinshasa. If they can quietly bring cuffs for one man, they can do so for all. Unless we rise now." Traoré's message wasn't a threat. It was a call for Africa's youth to stop asking for permission, to stop bowing, to stop retreating. Sovereignty is not a gift. He said it is something we must reclaim through knowledge, through resilience, and through unity. As the broadcast ended, millions across Africa felt something shift. It wasn't just that a plot had been exposed. A generation had been awakened. Under immense pressure from the international community and a tidal wave of public outrage across Burkina Faso and much of Africa, the Nigerian government had no choice but to act. There was only one path left: a formal public apology. Allies across the continent were fixed on a special broadcast from the gates of the Nigerian embassy in Ouagadougou. There were no flags, no red carpet, only a solitary microphone set on a concrete step. before the cameras of hundreds of journalists and millions of viewers watching live on television and social media. Nigeria's ambassador emerged. She wore no military uniform or ceremonial robe, just a plain suit, her face visibly tense. Standing at the microphone, her hands trembled slightly as she unfolded the statement. In a breath-holding silence, she bowed, deeply, slowly, a gesture not found in traditional diplomatic protocol, but one carrying the full weight of remorse and admission. On behalf of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, she began, "We extend our sincere and unconditional apology to the people and government of Burkina Faso." Her voice wasn't loud, but each word rang with clarity and tension. The statement continued, "We acknowledge the serious wrongdoing committed by individuals within our delegation who acted beyond their mandate. These actions do not reflect the official position of the Nigerian government and constitute a grave violation of diplomatic norms and national sovereignty." Behind the scenes, the world understood that this apology didn't come easily. It was only delivered after hours of tense negotiations between the Burkinabe leadership and regional envoys. Conditions for the apology included their resignation of two high-ranking Nigerian officials and the requirement that the statement be aired live, unedited, and without spin. The moment the ambassador bowed became instantly iconic, a rare image in African diplomatic history, one in which a regional powerhouse like Nigeria publicly admitted fault and bowed to a smaller nation. But the real difference wasn't on a map. It was in the will of the people and the integrity of leadership. The international community reacted swiftly. The African Union released a statement praising the spirit of accountability and dialogue shown by both nations. Major media outlets including Al Jazeera, BBC, Leon, and CNN reported on the apology as a symbolic power reversal, highlighting how Africa's new generation of leaders is reshaping the rules of engagement. President Ibrahim Traoré did not appear in the broadcast. He didn't need to. He'd already won, not with weapons, but with the will of the people. He had set a new standard for diplomacy, not submission, but mutual respect. As theta settled and the crisis abated, many expected President Ibrahim Traoré to respond with firmness and vengeance. After all, an attempt had just been made on his life, orchestrated by a neighboring power under the guise of diplomacy. But what came next surprised the entire continent. Not retaliation, but restraint. In a brief press statement from the presidential courtyard, Traoré stepped forward, not in military attire, but in traditional Burkina dress. His demeanor was calm, his eyes unwavering. "We will not pursue legal charges against Nigeria," he announced. "Africa must heal, not fracture." This was not weakness, it was resolve. In a world where retaliation is the default response, Traoré's decision shifted the tone of African politics. Understood that launching diplomatic or legal attacks would only deepen the cracks between nations. Instead, he chose to chart a new direction, one that emphasized unity over division. That same evening, while the media was still reeling from Nigeria's public apology, a far more consequential meeting was taking place behind closed doors in the Kosum Palace. Traoré met with senior military and intelligence leaders from Mali, Guinea, and Chad, key partners in the Sahel region. There were no cameras, no joint declarations, just firm handshakes, trusting glances, and audible covered in maps. "They'll try again," said a Chadian general. "Today it's Nigeria. Tomorrow, who knows?" Traoré nodded. "If they see patriotism as a threat, then unity must become our shield." The meeting lasted for hours. It wasn't about counterattacks. It was about building real cooperation, sharing intelligence, protecting national leaders, speaking in one voice on international platforms, and above all, refusing to fall into the trap of internal divisions sown by external interests. By the end of the meeting, they agreed on one core principle. None of us is safe until all of us are safe. It wasn't just a slogan. It became the foundation of a new alliance, not one bound by flashy treaties, but by mutual trust and a shared commitment to defending African sovereignty. The next morning, in a quiet ceremony at the Garden of Union, a symbolic grove where trees from every African nation were planted after Burkina Faso's revolution, Traoré stood silently beneath a young baobab sapling gifted by Zimbabwe. History is quiet, he murmured, until it screams. There were no fiery speeches, no public retaliation. Yet his actions spoke louder than any counterstrike. Burkina Faso will not kneel, and if Africa knights, neither will the continent. Following the spectacular failure of the covert mission known as Operation Silence, the Nigerian government was forced into a sweeping cabinet reshuffle. Key figures involved, especially Minister Charles Barr, widely believed to be one of the masterminds behind the attempt to capture President Ibrahim Traoré, were compelled to resign, citing health reasons. But the carefully chosen wording could not conceal the obvious. The operation failed, and the political cost was unavoidable. In the weeks that followed, reports of early retirements flooded in as several intelligence and security officials were quietly dismissed. Ambassador Nigerian, directly tied to the incident, was reassigned to a remote consulate in Eastern Europe, a diplomatic demotion disguised as rotation. While no official statement explicitly linked these changes to the events in Burkina Faso, the silence itself was a confession understood by all. Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, the atmosphere was entirely different. The people were not only relieved that the plot had been foiled, but deeply moved by Traoré's response, principled, composed, and free of vengeance. Images of him seated among farmers, children, and war veterans during post-crisis speeches became iconic. He was no longer just a president. He was a symbol, a spark of hope for millions. Murals began to appear throughout cities from Ouagadougou to Bobo Dioulasso, portraying him in traditional attire, red beret on his head, holding a constitution in one hand. The ripple effects extended far beyond Burkina Faso, across Senegal, Mali, Ghana, even as far south as South Africa. Citizens took to the streets holding banners that read, "Africa Awakened." It wasn't just a moment, it was a movement, a wave of renewed consciousness, that Africa could rise, govern itself, and reclaim its destiny without foreign interference or control. In universities, Traoré's leadership model became a topic of debate. At the University of Dar, a special symposium titled 21st Century Leadership, Lessons from Burkina Faso drew hundreds of students and scholars. Social organizations and youth movements began asking, if Burkina Faso can do it, why can't we? In Kenya, a group of students launched a media campaign called We Choose Dignity, with Traoré's portrait at the heart of the message. In Nigeria, despite censorship and pressure, student clubs quietly organized screenings of his speeches, particularly the part where he said, "We do not reject help, we reject submission." The aftershocks of the event in Burkina Faso did not just shake political circles. They awakened an entire generation, a generation that no longer feared, no longer bowed, and was beginning to reclaim its identity through the example of a leader who was real, grounded, and brave enough to go first. Ibrahim Traoré, a young leader once underestimated for his age and unconventional approach to diplomacy, has proven that true strength does not come from weapons, but from courage, clarity, and a deep connection with the people. When faced with a sophisticated international plot against him, the expected reaction would have been retaliation. But Traoré did not choose vengeance. There were no sanctions, no diplomatic counterblows, no fiery declarations. Instead, he chose restraint not out of weakness, but because he understood this. Real power lies in holding on to one's values when they are most under attack. Rather than respond with force, Traoré responded with transparency. Rather than strike back politically, he raised the banner of unity. His appearances alongside farmers, children, students, and soldiers were not performative. They were a clear message. He was not above the people, he was of them, and they were the true strength of the nation. He turned a plot meant to topple him into a moment of triumph. From the target of a secret operation, he became the symbol of a public awakening. He didn't just survive, he exposed the operation, dismantled its legitimacy, and elevated the conversation far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. From Ouagadougou, the sound of resistance echoed across the continent. Slogans like Waga is not Abuja, Africa is awake, and We Choose Dignity were no longer just chants. They were signals of a shift. Young Africans began asking hard questions. If Burkina Faso dared, why can't we? If a 30-year-old president could defeat an international trap without firing a bullet, is Africa finally stepping into a new era? Traoré did not win alone. He won because he stood with his people. He won because he refused to play the old power games where leaders protect their positions at the cost of principle. Instead, he flipped the script. He placed values above titles. The crisis may be over, but its ripples continue to spread from dorm rooms and parliament halls to villages in Burkina Faso and think tanks in Paris, Nairobi, and New York. People are no longer asking who is Traoré. They're asking, is this the beginning of a true African century? The answer remains uncertain. But one thing is clear. From the moment Traoré stepped forward not to retaliate, not to kneel, but to calmly and honestly declare, "We will not retaliate. We will rebuild," Africa gained a new voice. A voice that does not beg to be accepted. A voice that invites the world to listen. They thought they could silence him, but instead the people spoke for him, and the world had no choice but to listen. If you believe Africa deserves to tell its own stories, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more powerful truths the mainstream won't show you. We are the new voice of the continent, and you are part of it.